Welcome back. Now, the evidence of state capture and the daylight robbery of taxpayers' money has rocked South Africa. Now, attempts are being made to clean up state-owned entities. Yesterday, 3 Transnet executives were asked by the board why they should not be suspended. The CEO, Siyabonga Gama, and another 2 executives have until Monday to respond to those suspension notices. And of course, it's not clear, but it's been reported that the claims against them may be linked, certainly against Gama, may be linked to investigations into the controversial purchase of more than 1,000 locomotives. Leaked Gupta emails contain evidence that Gupta-linked firms received multi-billion rand kickbacks as part of the 50 billion rand, more than that, locomotives deal. Transnet, of course, the biggest logistics and transport company in South Africa with a near monopoly over port and rail networks. To discuss tonight, we're joined by the chair of the Transnet board, Dr. Popo Molefe. Thank you for being with us, Doctor. So there are multiple investigations, Treasury doing one. This comes out, is this something separate or part of the same probe?
Well, Treasury was not really looking at 1064, but in many ways there are linkages amongst all these investigations, because National Treasury focused largely on the confinement of the 95 locomotives and the 100 locomotives. But it also dealt with a whole lot of other matters, like Mackenzie, Trillion, Regiment contract. So there's a whole lot of issues, really, that they dealt with. But all of them we are dealing with as a package in implementing the recommendations.
All right, so 1064, you mean those 1,064 locomotives that were bought at reportedly inflated costs, reportedly with kickbacks involved. Can you tell us what Mr. Gama did? Look,
these matters are matters that must still be investigated thoroughly, and the man must, if ultimately he can't make a strong case, he may well have to appear before the disciplinary hearing. So would be the case with the rest. So we are basically saying that there was flagrant violation of the Public Finance Management Act, the procurement policy manual of the company, as well as Section 217 of the Constitution, all of which require that procurement should be transparent, should be fair, should be equitable, should be cost-effective, should be competitive. And all those key elements, the key elements that are reflected there were not followed. Yeah. Procedures.
He has been linked, though, to the reports, linked with the former CEO, Popo Molefe. Can you really protect him? People are going to connect the dots and think the worst here anyway.
Well, in reality, what we are doing with the investigations pertaining to the 1,064 locomotives is to disaggregate the case into a number of categories. The first category is the misconduct, which relates to labor matters, where there was failure by management to discharge their duty of care, skill, and due diligence in procuring these locomotives, and also failing to ensure that there was consequence management to the extent that their juniors would have been affected. Then the other section, and in that regard, you'd obviously have to deal with the disciplinary processes. But the second aspect would be the one of the commercial one, which would require us to review the contracts, look at the overpayments, if any, and the extent of such overpayment, and consider whether part of that money or all of it could be recovered.
The Gupta emails.
Then there was the third. The third category is the criminal one, where it becomes clear that there was criminal intent. To that extent, senior counsel would advise on the need for prosecution. And of course, we're working very closely with the SIU.
Can Transnet pursue those criminal charges? A lot of people are saying, why is nobody being prosecuted? Can you ask the Hawks? Already there are some investigations, but can Transnet play a role in that?
Well, there's been a lot of cases reported to the Hawks, and this one is part of the investigations by the SIU. We are hoping that in the next few weeks we'll get a detailed presentation by the head of the SIU to the entire board of Transnet, but also would be entering into some arrangement wherein we'll sign together with them a letter of engagement which defines clearly the milestones, the key performance areas and indicators.
In the Gupta emails, well, it was reported that 2 months before Siyabonga Gama became CEO, he went to Dubai. He said it wasn't paid for by the Guptas. Can you tell us, has there been a Gupta stooge in the role of CEO Transnet until this point?
Remember, my board has been in office for about 10 weeks only.
Since May?
Yeah, since May. It's about 10 weeks, really. I must say that, Mr. Gama did tell me that he met with Salim Essa, and he met with him here at Melrose Arc, and he met him again in Dubai, and he says he had called him when he was on his way back from the World Economic Forum. But he says the basis of the discussion was the dispute relating to the cancellation of the Trillion contract. I think I don't want to go too deep into these matters.
Do you think he lied? Because reports say that you believe he misrepresented, or the board believes he misrepresented information.
Yes,
so he lied to you.
The investigators, not to us. We were not there. The misrepresentation would have happened to the previous board, not our board. We got in there. There had already been commissioned the 2 investigations. The Waxman's investigation had been completed. The MNS was close to being completed because those got completed towards the end of May. Once these reports were done, we then decided to appoint a special committee of the board to consolidate all recommendations and to develop an action plan to implement the recommendation. And that is where we are now. We're busy with that. We're taking legal opinion. The MNS attorneys have been appointed to deal with this matter, and they have fairly powerful senior counsels working on these matters, straddling both commercial, labor, and criminal aspects of the case.
So, Dr. Molefe, you come into May. There were serious claims against Transnet before that billions had been spent in these kickbacks. I'd like to ask you if the trains are working where we are right now. But more importantly, you've been meeting with ministers, we understand. You've obviously been looking at the situation. How bad is it at Transnet?
Well, I don't know what you mean when you say we have been meeting with ministers about it. We have been meeting as the board, and we have been meeting with the lawyers to look at these matters. The situation is pretty bad, is of great concern, and that is why looking at the high expectations of the public and the information that is available to us, we have arrived at the conclusion that we should issue the notice of precautionary suspension and give the affected individuals the opportunity to respond. So it means still work to be done in the next few weeks.
Well, is the rot gone then?
Yeah. We couldn't just say, because there had been reports in the past, we're just going to move in like a bull in, I hope the Chinese don't get offended, in a Chinaman's shop. We had to firstly start from the position that this is a constitutional democracy. There's a rule of law that applies. And therefore, you give from the beginning the benefit of the doubt to the individuals affected. And that requires that we follow process, and this is what we are doing now.
You questioned why I was talking about ministers, but it seems like Pravin Gordhan has been integrally involved. He was reporting back on Transnet. How is that relationship going, working with government to get to the bottom of what happened? You know, just looking at the private sector, Christo Visser relating to Steinhoff was saying it's too big. We couldn't understand as the board. As the board and as government, can you get on top of this and come to grips with this?
Let me deal with the relationship with the minister is working very well. He naturally has to hold us accountable as the executive authority, but he also has to account to Parliament. So we report to him on what we are doing, the processes that we have started. Can we get on top of this situation? Well, do we have any choice? We don't have a choice. This is the period of the new dawn where we have to rebuild the public institutions, in particular the SOEs or state-owned companies. But to do so, you have to pass the phase of cleaning up. And where we are sitting, we believe that we are only scratching the surface of a much bigger problem in our organization. So quite clearly the investigation of the 1,064 locomotives does not adequately address the problems. There are many fundamental questions that we have to deal with. We'll get this one out of the way and focus on a much more deeper investigations, because quite clearly the tentacles are very wide. The claws, as I normally say, of corruption, very deep. How deep they go, none of us can predict. But as a result of all these things, we experienced a lot of problems with the weak financial management controls. There have been weak procurement. I think procurement had completely collapsed. So we have to rebuild all of those things and strengthen our internal audit to make sure that we can raise the red flags before the damage becomes too big.
All right, well, hopefully the truth will out, and we'll chat to you again. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Popo Molefe, Chair of the Transnet Board.